Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Many new investors make the mistake of jumping into investments without proper planning. Glen James says he sees this all the time. Glen's a former financial advisor who's built a large, loyal fan base with his suite of money-making podcasts, including Retire Right. He's also co-authored a book for new investors called The Quick Start Guide to Investing. And the first step in an investment strategy, he says, is to know your why. As Glen explains to Chris Ashmore, during his experience as an investment advisor, and even today, not enough people understand why they want to invest.
A lot of people would walk into my office and say, I want to invest in shares. I want to buy a property. I want to do all this stuff. And you kind of scratch the surface and it's like, okay, so why? Why do you want to do that? And a lot of the time, it was this notion that people were like, well, rich people have investments and I want to be rich. And I kind of push back because while money gives you choice, money gives you options, if you walk into an investment just because you see other people doing it, you can maybe choose the wrong investment. You might get distracted and then find another shiny object that's over there and then you might pull the money out. So I really want to challenge people with, well, why do you want to invest? And we really cut to the chase and really help people. If they don't have a why, we give a lot of examples. We help people to really try and form this why. One of the examples might be, I've got parents who might be about to retire now and their super balances aren't great and they're not going to have the dignified retirement that they could have had if they just knew about this stuff. So someone's why could be, well, I want a strong financial future so I'm not like my parents when I get to their age, as an example.
So the why is pretty much the start of an investment strategy. What do you recommend when it comes to doing an investment strategy?
Yeah, so I think there's broadly maybe 5 key parts of an investing strategy. And the first one is the why, or it might also have another word, goals. So why do you want to invest? What's your goal? And that will then lead to the second point of the time horizon. So your goal might be, well, I want to save up so we can pay for the kids' education, one lump sum, cash flow, they won't need HECS or help debt, and we need to do that within 12 years. It could be we want to save up and go on a holiday in 4 years. It could be, well, we just want to build wealth for retirement. So we need to look at the time horizon. And once we've got that, it does swing into the next point. And then point 3 and 4, they may intertwine, but I'll just start with the first one. You then need to look at the style of investment and the investment option to achieve that goal over the time horizon. And then our risk profile comes into it. So how much risk are we willing to take? And if it is a 10-year time frame, you'll look at your risk profile and say, well, we need to invest maybe 100% in equities as opposed to 70% in equities and 30% in defensive assets. Or if you've got a stronger risk profile, we're going to invest in 100% growth and then contribute less to that account over the time period. Now, the fourth point comes into play with our goals, our time horizon, and potentially the investment style. And that is around, what is the ownership structure of your investing vehicle? Now, there's broadly 6 ownership structures in your own name. It could be joint names with a spouse. It could be superannuation. It could be an investment bond. It could be a company. It could be a trust. So often, a lot of the times, people just go straight to the investment option in my own name. I'm going to build wealth without looking at the why, without looking at time horizons, without looking at risk profiles. And then the fifth kind of step, and we do go into a lot more detail in the book around this stuff, but it is that ongoing review. So we need to set up with the best intentions in place, but knowing things can change.
And how often should one review their strategy?
In the book, I basically made what I like to call an investing constitution. And what that is, a lot of us know a company will have a constitution that governs the company and has the rule book of the company. And I wanted to get people that they could write their own investing constitution. So they write down, this is my goal, this is the entity, this is the asset allocation, this is what we're doing, this is like everything. So if we get a bit, distracted throughout the year, I need to pull $1,000 out of my investment account. No, go back to the constitution. What does it say? Now, in the point where we talked about the investing option and style, have you got an account set up that's a one-stop shop ETF, and that is an exchange-traded fund, or are you building your own portfolio of ETFs? Now, I would suggest if you are building your own portfolio of ETFs, you may need to look at the actual investment every 3 months and rebalance, or you might just choose to do it every 6 months. In terms of the overall strategy, I think a yearly come back to base camp, have a look, is what we're planning still in play?
And what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people have when it comes to investing?
Yeah, so we've got a Facebook group for the podcast, and a lot of people, they're new investors, they'll jump in and they'll first write, hey, what's the cheapest brokerage account? And the biggest mistake, and we've all been guilty of this, we go into solution mode first. It's easy to invest, it's easy to buy shares, and it's harder to stay invested. So one of the biggest mistakes is people go straight to solution mode. Another mistake, they don't get their house in order. In the book, I talk about the sound financial house, how we need to build our financial house the same way we build a house, with strong foundations, which could be a spending plan or budget, an emergency fund, no consumer debt. We might have our income insurances in place, and we might have our estate planning and will sorted. Once we get those foundations in place, look at what our goals are, because some of our goals that we mentioned in point 1 and point 2, they might be a short-term goal that the money doesn't need to be invested. It can stay in cash or in a term deposit for 12 months or 18 months. So yeah, I reckon the biggest stuff that I see people get into solution mode straight away, they don't really have their house in order. So they've got sloppy money management. They invest $1,000. Oh, rego's due. Oh, crap. I need to get $500 back out of my investing account, when they could be selling down that investment at the worst time. And the whole exercise has cost them $40, where we haven't built a strong, sound financial house.
Are people investing differently now because of cost of living pressures versus when the economy's good? Yeah,
look, the RBA say that it takes 18 months for an interest rate increase to fully hit the market. And, I've talked to a lot of cafe owners, and they're like, people are spending less or not coming in as much. So anecdotally, if we are spending less, people will have less money to invest for the future. And it could be a matter of, do I pay rent this week or put $300 in my investing account? Do I pay the mortgage this week or continue salary sacrificing to super? So I think it is tough, but the solace here that we have in Australia is that we've got superannuation. If you're an employee, there is a built-in mechanism that 11.5% going up to 12% next year will be put aside for your financial future. And that's a really good thing. And I hypothesize that if you stay out of consumer debt, live on less than you earn, keep your superannuation going, even if you salary sacrifice a little bit, you're going to be ahead of a lot of the population without doing too much.
Well, finally, Glenn, financial advisors, when's a good time for anyone to go and see a financial advisor?
Yeah, I honestly think if you've got your emergency fund, you're out of consumer debt, and because this stuff you can do without a financial advisor. So you want to have some basic housekeeping sorted first, right? Of course, you can always call an advisor, and this is the reason why I started the podcast, and people were coming to me for financial advice, and I said, well, you don't need financial advice. You need to get out of debt and get a budget. So I think, realistically, you've got consumer debt cleaned up. You might start to have some emergency cash savings, and you've got some surplus income and you want to plan your future. Alternatively, You may have received an early inheritance. Recently on my podcast, Retire Right, we've done an episode about the intergenerational wealth transfer. So you may receive an inheritance and you don't have your house in order. Well, it's probably a good time to get advice. Or if you're 10 years out from calling it a day and looking to retire, I think that's always a good time to get advice.
That was Glen James, author of The Quick Start Guide to Investing and host of the Retire Right podcast. You can find a link to the Retire Right podcast in the show notes of this episode. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.